According to Emily Morgan and Karen Ainsbury, who wrote the article Earthquakes, stated, "Believe it or not, there is a 100% chance that an earthquake will happen somewhere in the world today. Just think that you could be sleeping or even working while an earthquake is happening right below your feet or right before your own eyes. Natural disasters are something that nobody can control, but it's important to know about them and ways to protect yourself when the events may occur." Recently, I have read through several articles on a database to present you today with some information about earthquakes and all the elements that are held within them. Knowing and understanding where earthquakes come from, along with speaking about safety guidelines and stating earthquake records from over the years. As Christopher Skiles stated in his article Earthquake, he explains the explanation of earthquakes by stating, "The released energy passes through the earth as seismic waves, which causes the shaking. Seismic waves continue to travel through the earth after the fault motion has stopped." The motion of the earthquake is explained and demonstrated through the article Earthquakes by the visual guides understanding the earth. When the plates of the earth's crust don't react and slide together, it will cause the plates to then collide with one another. The plates will then start to move but not in a straight position. This will then lead to the sliding and colliding motion of the earthquake process. The visual guides understanding the earth stated this to be described as the earth plates becoming deformed. With all this pressure added up, the earth will begin to move along with the fault plates to start the quick process, which is known as an earthquake by the visual guides understanding the earth. With all this motion and pressure added up, every earthquake is different in each way by how the plates act within the earth with one another. National Geographic discusses an earthquake situation throughout their article and says that any earthquake can react through the earth's crust by how the plates act towards each other. National Geographic also adds in, as the tectonic plates push against, pull away, grind past, or even dive under one another, fault zones are created, which is what happens during an earthquake. The cause of earthquakes are because of the plate movements, but there is no way to stop them considering that they are labeled natural disasters. The frightening part about the plate movements is that an earthquake doesn't just shake the ground, but it can make a huge crack throughout it. With this statement, not every earthquake will do this type of damage, but depending on the area and the intensity of the earthquake, things like this can happen. Christopher Skiles stated in his article, Earthquakes are not restricted to the plate boundary itself, but occur over broad zones over several hundred miles long. Different earthquakes continue to happen around the world today, and determine just how powerful each and every one of them are. They have different types of ranking scales to rank the earthquakes by how much shaking is involved. National Geographic explains in their article Earthquakes, measuring an earthquake by how scientists use a method called the Richter scale, which was created throughout the 1930s and 1940s by Charles Richter and Bino Gutenberg themselves. Today, National Geographic states that scientists use the Richter scale for magnitude and the Moralic intensity scale for how it affects the land. National Geographic explains that the Moralic intensity scale as it will demonstrate the ranking by Roman numerals. The Roman numeral 1 will be used to demonstrate the earthquake ranking as a minimal shake with none to little damage. With that statement, the Roman numeral 5 will be known as a lot of shaking throughout the area with damage involved. Lastly, with the Roman numeral 10, it will be known as a maximum earthquake and has major damage involved. With all the measuring methods happening to see the damage that earthquake leaves behind, it is stated by Louise Slinsberg in the article, Let's Find Out, Earthquake, What are Natural Disasters, that earthquakes are the leading natural disaster that causes the most damage to the shaking ground compared to other natural disasters. Even though the news usually only demonstrates earthquakes that are massive, there are many different types of earthquakes that happen. Just because you may not feel an earthquake or see damage done, there is still a great possibility that earthquakes happen considering plates move without us humans even feeling them. With some earthquakes come safety guidelines to follow and health effects that happen in each type of event. Understanding that most earthquakes happen that are rated a 1, as stated from the National Geographic, will probably need no to very little medical attention, considering that nobody will probably even feel it. With a major earthquake happening there needs to be major safety guidelines that need to be followed considering the major amount of healthcare that will probably be needed. Earthquakes can spark up in a matter of seconds, so whenever there is any notice of one, taking cover as quickly as possible is overall the best idea. This type of natural disaster has basically the same guidelines to most of other disasters, so reacting quickly will always be your safest plan. Taking cover or even waiting the event out will always be the best plan, but try not to be near a window, and staying inside will always be safer. But if you were already outside when earthquake started, you need to find a clear area and please stay away from all trees and buildings considering they are at fall risk. Understanding that you personally don't know how massive the earthquake are at the moment, you should treat all earthquakes the same considering the safety guidelines to natural disasters. In the words of Earl Leary in the book Earthquakes, he explains, all 50 states are vulnerable to earthquake hazards, although the risks vary greatly across the country. Even though the area you live in is considered rare or has never had any massive earthquakes, you need to consider that this can always happen. Another possibility with earthquakes are the health effects that can appear. According to SWA Gunn, in the article Health Effects of Earthquakes, states that you will always have to consider all that other humans will be affected during the earthquake. Also consider that health facilities and services will most likely be crammed, along with secondary illnesses from disaster always being considered, and lastly, you need to think about the post-disaster recovery from all that was affected. Depending on the damage or severity of the earthquake will depend upon the health effects that will come into play. If there is a maximum earthquake, it needs to be important to understand that health effects will be in full force because there will most likely be a lot of injuries depending on the location and population of where the earthquake was presented. Every type of earthquake will result in several different types of health effects depending on the disaster that did happen. The visual guide's Understanding the Earth explains in his article, Earthquakes, describes how there are usually over 1 million earthquakes that happen in just 1 year on our planet Earth. With the article Earthquakes by National Geographic, they state China in 2008 had the least amount of deadliest effects with 69,000 deaths. But China also holds the record holder of having 655,000 deaths in 1976. With the top 10 deadliest ranking in the article Earthquakes by the National Geographic, there is close to average ranking of a billion deaths. The ranking of a billion deaths ranged from the years 1908 to 2010. With a ranking of deadliest, there is a range of a lot of hot spots that earthquakes seem to range in. As Christopher Skiles stated in his article, Earthquake, there is a location that has been noticed by scientists in a continuing area of where multiple earthquakes happened throughout the years of 1900 to 2013. Yes, it is not known to where earthquake will exactly happen, but considering the past occurrences of the events that have been distributed throughout the same area along the globe. Christopher Skiles explains in his article, Earthquakes, there is a 90% occurrence in the ring of constant earthquakes. This ring of earthquakes that Christopher Skiles explains is demonstrated by the National Geographic as an area of China, Haiti, Japan, and Russia, and many more countries that are near the few. Even with the areas of hotspots that scientists have noticed, there is a factor that can come in to combine a form of risk for an earthquake. Earl Leary states in his book, Earthquakes, the combination of seismic risk, population, and vulnerable infrastructure can help improve the understanding of which urban areas across the United States face risks from an earthquake hazard that may not be immediately obvious from the probability maps of shaking hazards alone. Understanding that Earth and seismic plates are constantly moving and rotating, which could cause an earthquake anywhere at any time, is something everyone needs to keep in mind. By understanding and connecting with all that was discussed will not only help you in a time of need when this event of an earthquake could happen, but now you know information about what earthquakes are, what causes them, along with the ranking phases of each type, safety and health guidelines, and lastly, the record breakers across the globe. There is no way to stop an earthquake from happening, but learning more will help us protect ourselves and our families the best way possible. Earthquakes are not new to the world, but trying to understand the little information we know about them can help for future references. Thank you.